Hey everyone, it's Michael. So I get a lot of questions online about like foraging and wild foods and such, so I figured I'll make some short videos and kind of talk about some different local and native and invasive species of wild foods that we see a lot here in Southern California. So today I wanted to talk about wild radish. It's a plant we see very often here in Southern California. It grows in big patches, kind of like the one you see here. Grows in pretty acidic, sandy type soil, and it's considered an invasive species. Now, what makes an invasive species? An invasive species comes from a different region, and it usually has a lot less competition and a lot less predators, so it kind of grows abundantly, it grows rapidly without any control, and it can take a lot of the nutrients in the soil from the native plants. Okay, so wild radish. It's part of the mustard family. Brassicas. Brassicas include cabbages, Brussels sprouts, turnips, cauliflowers, rutabagas. Different brassicas in Southern California include it's like Mediterranean mustard, field mustard. There's black mustard as well, and the big one is the radish here. So the wild radish here that grows in the wild are actually the same species as cultivated radishes that have been bred for their larger roots. So as someone with a culinary background, I like to focus a lot about the edibility of these wild foods. Sometimes we'll see an ingredient pass through our kitchens as a garnish, and then we'll be taking a walk someday and outside in the wild, and this will pop out to you. It's like, I've used this as a garnish. Well, that's me. But anyways, after a while, you kind of get used to seeing a lot of these plants in and outside of your kitchen, and they'll pop out at you and you'll say, hey, that might be edible, it looks similar, and you'll find out it's like in the same families as something you're very used to working with. So let's talk about edibility of these plants. These plants are 100% edible from blossom to root. That includes the leaves, the flowers, the pods, the seed pods that they create, and we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. These wild radishes are mostly loved for their blossoms, which have like a sort of like a sweet, peppery, fragrant, almost like saline kind of type of bite. The seed pods are also really good. I can see some of those right here. And even their greens, which are super prized when they're young and tender, kind of something like these. The seed pods can be pretty plump, pretty spicy, and really pack a peppery bite. They're really good pickled, fermented, and they go really great on salads, hummus. They hold the seeds, they're nice and meaty inside. Like I said, these are a great addition to salads if you pickle them a little bit. Okay. Yeah, these are great. These are sweet, nice and peppery. These would be great on any, cold dish. The greens of the radish are super abundant, really tender, and super easy to harvest as well. Along with other brassicas, the greens start to appear like late winter, kind of early in the year, and the young tender greens are going to be definitely the prime for eating because they're going to be a lot less bitter. They're going to be a little less hardened, sort of. They're going to be more tender. These young greens, their flavor can range from, a little earthy, a little peppery, a little spice. But I find that of the brassica wild species here, these are definitely one of my favorites because they're the mildest, compared to, say, like mustard. Different kinds of mustard we find here. Those pack a little more punch, almost have, can get wasabi flavors. These are nice if you're used to, something similar to like spinach or maybe arugula, And as you get larger plants, you see these large kind of broad leaves. These can get a little bit bitter. They're a little rougher around the edges. Not so much great for eating. The buds and the blossoms of the plant can actually be sauteed up just like broccoli. They actually have a broccoli taste, which is interesting to me because they almost look like little broccoli florets. But saute them up with a little bit of olive oil, some lemon, salt. Got a little tasty snack. Garnish with the flowers if you're looking for the whole rounded experience. Talking a little bit about the blossoms, they usually start blooming in the early year. Here in San Diego, where I am on the West Coast, they start blooming like late February, March, and we'll see them everywhere in April. The colors can range from purple, yellow, pink, white, pretty sweet smelling, sweet, and they can, a lot of people love these blossoms. A lot of restaurants and fine dining establishments will use these blossoms as garnish to make their dishes look really pretty. But, moreover, beyond prettiness, they're pretty tasty. They taste sweet, peppery, reminiscent of radish, but not packing a punch like the actual thing. Also, it's kind of refreshing. Something maybe at the beginning of a meal, kind of get your appetite going, wake you up a little. Then lastly, we have the roots. The roots of this plant, like I said earlier, are the same species as the cultivated radish. However, these are not bred for their size. And then the soil that they're grown in as well impacts the, texture, flavor. Usually a little bit sandier soils, looser, more acidic soils, they'll grow better. They definitely smell good, like radishy. Not much, really. They're kind of woodier than normal. I've seen larger ones that can be sliced up, pickled. You can make kimchi out of these. Preservation is always a good method with wild food. So, where to find wild radish? Wild radish is originally native to Europe and Southeast Asia, North Africa, and it's become pretty invasive around the North America and Australia in particular. Australia has taken some pretty big measures to try to get rid of wild radish because it's such an invasive species and it takes up so much nutrients from their native crops and their native species. It's become an issue. So they've been doing spraying of different types. Luckily here in Southern California, it's not as big of an issue and we're not at spraying, little fields like this yet. But, that's why I kind of encourage wild food eating, because we're doing almost a favor by picking these plants, by eating them. It's essentially free food. It's right outside our doors and we don't acknowledge it till we know what it is exactly and understand its possibilities of deliciousness. That also goes to say that different regions may have different flavors of, the same species. The same species could have different genetics. It could, as far as like the wild radish here, while being the same genus and family as the one in Europe, the leaves, the flowers could have different chemical compounds, and that's super unique to where we're at and what time we're at, and our region, our terroir, essentially. And that's pretty cool in cooking as well, and preserving. I'm super big on fermentation, and I like preserving a time and place. I think it's really cool, unique, and speaks to a time in your life, whether that be good, bad, you're happy. Different smells can kind of bring you to a time and place. You open a jar up 7-8 months later, you smell it, and you're automatically on that same exact trail, that same exact moment where you're sniffing that flower for that first time. So I really like that. Anyways, so I think I'll be making more of these little videos because, if you're a wild food enthusiast like me, this stuff excites you. I always get questions online and, I'm happy to answer them all the time, but I figure why not make a little sort of video diary it's a little more accessible to people curious about wild food. These are obviously, if you're even a rookie forager, these are one of the easiest ones on the list. However, a lot of people, I find that they stop after this, fennel, and all the ones that are super common when there's so much more. We'll take a little more in-depth look at what kind of stuff happens throughout the seasons here in San Diego. We'll see that there's a lot more cool things to be found than we thought at first. Anyways, thank you. Also, if you have any comments or questions, I'd be happy to answer them as well. Thanks.